Welcome to IPSE Live. Today we're looking at the issues facing those choosing to be self-employed when over the age of retirement. We'll be investigating what government does to support this group, the impact of the recent pension reforms and what has caused the rapid increase in those aged over 65 going it alone. Joining me today is Stephen Pfeiffer, Communications Manager at the Prince's Initiative for Mature Enterprise, Ed Sayers, Financial Planner at Brightcube Money, and Sarah Hodson, Vice Chair of the CFBT Education Trust and a freelancer herself. As always, if you have any questions for the panel, you can get in touch with us on Twitter using the hashtag IPSELive, that's IPSE Live. Start with you, Stephen. What do you think it is about self-employment that is attracting so many more over 65s now?
Well, by way of an introduction, Prime, the Prince's Initiative for Mature Enterprise, was set up by the Prince of Wales, and we help people over the age of 50 start businesses. If we're looking specifically at the over 65s, the reasons for going into self-employment and starting businesses mirror a lot of the reasons why over 50s do. And there are a range. It can be flexibility, so managing, maybe caring for dependents, having a bit of leisure time whilst working. It can be topping up pension pots. It can be they haven't finished working yet. They've still got something to offer. They don't want to retire. And it's the opportunity to do something for themselves for the first time in their lives, maybe. They've worked for a corporate or a boss for 30, 40 years, and they want to do something on their own. So this is why we've seen a bit of a boom in the over 65s turning to self-employment.
That's interesting. I mean, Sarah, you fit the demographic, but you've obviously been self-employed for a lot longer than that. You didn't make the leap, quite as late. But your experience, your sort of professional circles, your social group, what are you finding people are telling you?
Mostly what I'm finding is that people are saying they're doing it now partly because they want to, few of them because they have to. In other words, the topping up, we come to the financial bit, but topping up. But a much greater sense that, I did a bit of hunting around for some quotes, yes. And the first one I got was 65 is the new 50. And so, in a way, that sort of reflected. But then I got the counter to that, which is whatever you do, never tell them how old you are, because it frightens them to death. And the other one was that we're getting quite a big demographic now, so we need to be taken a bit more seriously. And then a number of other ones too, but the final one was, at least I don't have to go to the office Christmas party anymore. So there were various reasons of various people wanting to do it, but they came from, the group I talked to were university, big business, media, broadcast, PR, things like that.
Professional services.
So professional services mostly, some who'd had a whole career and doing this in the last 3 or 4 years. Some had started their, what I would call freelance or self-employed career, probably in their 50s, either a time of change in their organisation or something going on in their personal life that made it better for the flexibility.
Okay.
So certainly I would say there's a trend for more of my sort of age group being engaged for longer. Now that has a kick for taking jobs or taking work that others could do, but I think that's what it is that comes back time and time again, is you've got competent people, you've got networks already in place, credibility's in place, and they don't reinvent the wheel. So that's why people use us. That's
interesting, I suppose, because what you're saying there is that these people aren't going from one type of career or one profession and then getting to 65 and saying, I fancy doing something different now. No. You're thinking, well, they'll actually continue doing the same thing, but they'll just alter the mode that they use. They'll go self-employed.
Yes, or people who have got to senior in one level, that they can sort of use some of their skills, but maybe in a different environment.
Okay.
So somebody who I know who did a training and development role, did quite a lot of senior executive board work, now mentors people who are setting up small businesses.
Right.
So taking that sort of skills and using them
so
in
it's
a
almost
different
like
environment.
they're taking the skills they've learned and do something that they're quite passionate about.
Absolutely.
I mean, Stephen, have you got a slightly, I know that you work with people that might not be finding it so easy or not quite so successful, so you might have a different view.
Definitely. We produced some research recently which looked at general, again, over 50s self-employment, but you can use similar arguments that between the ages of 50 and 69, there are about 1.5 million people who've been pushed out of work, and that is through a range of redundancy, ill health, and forced early retirement. So self-employment is actually another route back into employment. So they are slightly different to your group of people. I was also going to say, you actually highlighted a really important issue that our research brought out about, you said you're doing stuff and it might deny opportunities for other people. Our research actually counters that. It says that if you engage an older workforce, that actually doesn't crowd out young people. The economy isn't a zero-sum game. It isn't one in, one out. It's not like a nightclub, which I say anecdotally, it's not one in, one out.
Yeah.
Basically, what it means is that if you keep older people working, there's more spending in the economy, there's more demand, and that should create opportunities for other people. And interestingly, if the over 65s are going into business, they might need the services of other people. So we'll be probably exploring skill set later on, but if they need help building a website, if they started something new, then they can employ someone with that skill set. And also, anecdotally, from the people that are coming to Prime, it's not just continuing their career just on their own. So you've worked at a senior level for, say, a large corporate, and you're going to do something similar. But there are examples of people who've been turning a hobby into a business. We've got someone down in the southwest who was a senior executive and now does a business selling wood burning products, so like
exactly
hot tubs.
Switching their focus.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so
okay.
it is a range that will come out there.
That's interesting. Just to pick up on, you sort of mentioned there that people that have been sort of forced out of work or when they might not want to, because being over 65 or over 50 doesn't necessarily mean that you want to retire. Are you finding those people are wanting to keep working or be self-employed because of financial reasons, or just because they want to be involved? Actually, Sarah, it's maybe one for you. That it's because it's a good life balance. Is it financial? What are you seeing?
I mean, I think you don't want to feel out of it. People don't want to feel past it, shall we say? But also, there's a lot of. I think interestingly, among my women circle, all of us have worked all our lives. So it's not like we're suddenly deciding the children have gone, let's start working. It's actually a continuation. But it's variations on a theme. So somebody that was in front of the cameras doing TV work is now coaching people to do it. So it's that type of switching
Well,
around.
that goes with what you're saying about preparing the next generation.
It's preparing the next generation.
Yes.
Sort of
And the
work.
things like IT, I mean, question I asked, and what some that you asked, and some of the barriers and the difficulties, it's about keeping up to date. And it's technology. And actually you need to have kids or grandkids who can be the ones that actually show you how to do it. And things like Twitter or Facebook or where your media presence is, how do you market?
Yeah,
how do you use things like LinkedIn? How do you use all of those sorts of things?
But then again, I can offer something slightly different. The research that we put out recently goes down an argument where we're living longer as a country, so we're spending more years in retirement if you think of the average life expectancy. So people also need to continue working so that they can retire on a better pension or better savings.
That's interesting. I think this is a good point to bring you in, Ed. It'd be interesting to get involved. I think that we talk about pensions. There's a lot about pensions. It's sort of probably one of the biggest sort of pieces of news out there for self-employed people at the moment. And even if you're not 65 now and you're self-employed and you're thinking about the future, what do you think? I mean, the recent announcements around pensions, the reforms that are going on. What do they mean to self-employed people?
Well, I think first of all, the announcements were incredibly unexpected when they happened. The increase in flexibility the change in legislation is going to bring to people at the stage where they get to the stage where they want to consider retirement is actually huge, and I think it's changed dramatically how people view the formal pension saving that they do, either as a self-employed individual, as an employed individual, and actually when they come to get their hands on that money, it's far more flexible now.
Well, that's the key. The flexibility is key.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's one of the biggest words of self-employed people. I think.
So it's the flexibility that it gives. Traditionally, when someone got to retirement age, the only option they really had was to purchase an annuity. If you were purchasing an annuity, generally it was incredibly fixed, and this was the income for the rest of your life. Nowadays, I think if people are looking to either phase in retirement or change their view on how they approach retirement, either go from full-time employed to becoming self-employed in one form or another, having this pension money behind you, which can either can flexibly supplement income as and when you need it to, allow you to put off the need to annuitise to a later date if that's what you want, is incredibly positive. And for that to be available now to everybody in the country.
Well, I think that's important, because self-employed people are notoriously bad at sort of getting involved in the pension thing, and it's the sort of thing that maybe culturally doesn't fit. I mean, what I mean, you
potentially,
you
I
work with people every day, I mean.
think there's definitely an important need for education in terms of the real benefits that saving, let alone saving into a pension, can actually bring, and one of the main reasons of why you actually work in the first place. What are you planning and building towards? Is an incredibly important message that people need to get their heads around. So I think the important message is to make sure that you are doing something, that you are saving. But into what depends on your personal circumstances.
Well, that's interesting. To put you on the spot then, if you're a 30-year-old freelancer now and you're thinking, well, what are the different investment vehicles that are available? If you're thinking you're 30 years old, you sort of realise, well, that it's a bit more flexible now. I can get involved in what's your...
Yeah, I think an incredibly general answer is that it's horses for courses, really. What are you saving and building towards? Generally speaking, people will work, and they'll have one eye on the fact that at one stage they aren't going to work anymore, either because they don't want to or because they physically can't or whatever. So the saving for retirement, there are a number of formal tax reliefs, tax benefits to saving into a formal pension, as opposed to something else such as an ISA, etc., etc. Now but as I say, it's horses for courses. If you're looking at a long-term saving and long-term planning, then there are options. And if you're looking for something, be it building up a deposit for a house or for school fees for children or university or whatever, slightly more medium-term plans, there are other options out there. But I think the important message is to actually take the money that you're earning and seriously, and the fact that you are now your own employer. And if you don't do this, then no one else is going to do it.
Well, that's interesting. I think auto-enrolment, I mean, that's coming in for traditional employees or permanent employees. Does that have any impact on freelancers or self-employed people, or is it?
It depends how the individual is working and who they're working for. Obviously, if as a freelancer or a contractor you are contracted into a bigger business, depending how you are employed by them, would potentially make you eligible to join their auto-enrolment pension scheme for the period of time that you're working there, be it 6 months, a year, whatever. If you're operating through a limited company, for example, then all of a sudden it's a business-to-business contract and agreement. Therefore, it's your own business has an onus to, which is effectively you, if you like, has the onus to save and plan for your own retirement. So, depending how people are employed by these companies, they would either be enrolled onto the big company's pension scheme, or again, the onus is on them. For someone who is freelancing or just self-employed on their own, they've fallen through the gaps, if you like, or gaps in the net of the auto-enrolment. And the other big thing they're not missing out on, obviously, is the additional contributions from an employer, if you like. So it's reaching the vast majority of the workforce, if you like. But again, the message is always if you're self-employed, the onus is on the individual to plan and do something for
Well,
themselves.
that sort of goes with it's the whole ethos of self-employment, isn't it? You're your own boss. That means you have to be doing what your boss would be doing if you're working for someone. I mean, you mentioned that the announcement was rather unexpected when it came to pensions, the flexibility. The fact that government has done that. I mean, Stephen, you're sort of involved in campaigning on a lot of these issues. Now that is clear that they've recognised self-employed people in this way, and they've recognised they have slightly different needs, what else do you think the government could be doing right now for people that are in that age demographic that want to either continue working self-employed or are looking to get into self-employment?
I mean, one avenue they could be going down is actually engaging with the corporate world businesses. So if they're looking to, if people are retiring or they're looking at restructuring, to actually offer them the about self-employment, actually businesses helping them, because if they go down self-employment, continue working, it might actually come back to the business. They can hire them out as freelancers and or contractors and do business with them that way. They know the employee and they might get a great service from them. That's definitely one thing that the government could be doing.
Well, I think that I mean, we're talking about what businesses can get out of. It's obviously, they've got a great wealth of knowledge, and they've been, you'd expect, been working for a long time. I mean, do you think businesses, I mean, Sarah, you're out there, you're dealing with your clients every day, and so are your sort of your peers. Do you think businesses really quite grasp yet the potential, the sheer number of people and the number of sort of years of experience out there in this sort of demographic that are there for them to use on a self-employed basis?
Some organisations, yes, some no. One company I'm working with at the moment had probably never thought about it until somebody, as it were, introduced me into it, and I've introduced somebody else to do a piece of work for them, and they hadn't used freelancers, and now they are using a couple of other people.
So you introduced the
well.
concept, and then yourself.
And then myself,
Double sales.
and then they've used other people as well. Whereas, I mean, if you look at government's got a real tradition, and local authorities as well, of using contractors in a number of different ways. So there's a big tradition there. Other organisations, you'll find it patchy, and that's my experience in terms of how they use people. But a lot of it is around change management, changing, upgrading, supporting, mentoring, coaching.
So there's
those
specific areas that have a real
areas that they have a thing where you can go in, do it, come out again.
Project management based stuff.
It's a lot of that, and you'll see the same thing.
Yeah, quite. I think it's also very sector to sector as well.
Yeah, and just picking up on some of the things that Ed was saying, my accountant, when I set up, one thing that she actually made me do was put a standing order on my bank account once a year into a pension fund.
Okay.
But then over the years, I mean, I had some money in Equitable Life, and of course that happened. So I had to take an annuity. So someone like Ed now helps people like me, because I've got an income stream coming from a number of different places. And actually, how do you bring that all together? How do you plan for it? And I think that's probably an issue that a lot of, let's say, older self-employed people probably are not on top of as much as, am I going to take my state pension? If so, when should I do it? How do I do it? What's the tax implication? What other about any other things I've got? And I think that's where you need professional advice.
And it's one of the key questions.
Yeah, because you mentioned the annuity. I have got a small annuity, which makes me see red, because I feel I've been absolutely nailed to the floor with it, because that was the only option at the time with that piece of money. But having proper advice meant that at least I got that money as opposed to lost it. So
I think that's key. It's the fact that for self-employed, your business finances and your personal finances are one and the same, and that do you find people have one or the other in good nick and sort of a difference there?
Yes, yeah. I think it's HMRC probably wouldn't necessarily agree with you in terms of someone's business finance and someone's personal finance being one and the same thing. But yes, I think it is important for someone to look at their situation as a whole, to view the work that they're doing in their business as the money that they are going to have personally, in one form or another, when they do decide to not work anymore, or as hard as they have been working up to this point. And it is when someone does get to the point in time when they're considering retiring, or they're looking at different ways of working, all of a sudden they're in this position where they have income streams from lots of different places, and actually it could be the business, it could be the personal, it could be previous employment that you've had over the years, it could be other savings that you've accrued in that time. So, and it's just making sense of all of those things and getting the right balance on all the different things is very important.
And one other thing too is, if you've been employed by somebody sometime in the past, is make sure you don't lose track of anything. I managed to track down 8 years worth of pension of an employer I had between the 70s and early 80s, and it cut in at a certain point, but I had to quite work to find it, and that also is like another of the income streams that you're talking about.
Absolutely, and I think while we've had these big announcements around the pensions sort of early this year in the budget, the majority of the announcements aren't coming into effect until April next year. So in terms of people looking to retire between now and then, I think they have to be very careful about their options, whether they do actually do it now or whether they look to wait until all these announcements come into effect.
Okay, interesting. I think we've looked at the sort of the financial side of things, and that's very important, but there's obviously a work-life balance too, and I think that's often lost in the all the talk about planning for the future and everything. I think do you see that that's a big reason for people coming into self-employment? I mean, is it just I need to keep working because I can't afford to retire, or is it because I want to be doing it? I mean, what's your experience?
Well, anecdotally, it's probably a mixture of both. There are some people who want to continue working. They're vibrant. They're generation today of over 65's. They're completely different to previous generations before them. So they want to continue working. They want to be active. There's the work-life balance. Maybe they've got caring responsibilities, either for someone dependent that's ill, or maybe grandchildren that they want to be involved and they want
that flexibility is what they're looking for.
Exactly, that flexibility. But then there are people that do need to work, and they need to top up pension funds, and they do need to get different revenues coming in so they can live better for when they can't work at all.
I suppose for me the elephant in the room as far as older people working is that there's discrimination there. So in permanent employment, we always hear about that. We always hear that once you're over 55 or over 60, it's very hard to get another job. People don't want to hire people that are older. Is that the same for self-employed people at that age?
In terms of being pushed out or not
or just not being able to get the contracts because of their age? Is that do they see that as much?
Well, in our experience, we see businesses being set up and doing quite well. We do know from the Cranfield School of Management that businesses run by over 50s have great growth rates and great employment rates. So it does suggest that they can set up sustainable businesses, get into self-employment, and can get the contracts. But the age discrimination point is actually quite an important one. It's explored in employment. So KPMG did some studies saying that when employees get to 50, there's a silent tipping point where their employers are actually looking at them completely differently. And then through our research, we can see that if you're over 50 and up to 65, there is a higher chance that you'll be made redundant. And then just more generally, if you're over 50, you've got a far higher chance of long-term unemployed. So again, that does lead to going down the self-employment route. Flexibility, finding an alternative avenue into employment.
I mean, so what's your experience? Are you finding that it's as easy to get work as it was sort of 20, 30 years ago, or do you find people give you that?
It's different. I think it's different for everybody. Most people, when they first go self-employed, in my experience, it's with their previous employer or somebody in that area who knows them. As you sort of go on in your self-employed career, it's much more about contacts and networks. I'm always amazed how naive people are about the concept of networks and keeping the networks going and knowing who's in your networks and where they are and how they might use you. And I think that's a real issue for slightly older people too. They're not very good at it, and they don't quite know, A, how to use a network, or B, how to access it. And it's not just because you can't press the buttons right. It's actually you don't know how to deal with it face to face. In my experience, frankly, as I've got older, I found it much easier to get work. It's a real tipping point, and you've said, it was really interesting what you just said, Stephen, because I was self-employed from my middle 30s, really, and I can remember at about late 40s, early 50s, a couple of people sort of mentioning, well, getting a bit long in the tooth now, isn't it about time, thought something else, and younger people coming up. And I remember sticking it out, and then suddenly you get to a certain point and somehow you're valuable because you've got wisdom and you've got all this experience that's behind you, and you've seen it all go around before, and suddenly you're very valuable.
Yeah, and I think if you have develop that network, and,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden you're in a position where you have such a wealth of contacts.
And you don't
and
have, and
people
you
you
don't
can
get
call.
involved in office politics, so you can sit above the politics, and you can be professional and very supportive, because you don't want their jobs, you don't want to do that. So it's
Not a threat anymore.
not a threat anymore. And my experience now is people are more likely to ask, can you do, will you do? And the answer for me at my point is, yes, if I can, I will, because it's interesting. Okay, that's a luxury, but I would say, well, I've done my financial planning in the past and kept it going.
Definitely, and on the networking front, the ONS did some studies on the growth in self-employment, and they said older people are more likely to be self-employed because they've already got the networks. It's unlocking that potential. It's not just friends and family, it's the careers that they've gone through, the people they've met, they've already got. And then we, as a charity, we actually provide networking events, and the reception we get when we put these things on is, wow, this is amazing. And people watching this podcast, this podcast now, if they just typed in their area, business club or networking event, there'll be hundreds out there. And it's just a case of, actually, if you want to meet people, it's doing a little bit of search, and there will be the resources out there.
The only problem with networking events in my sort of field always is that if somebody's networking with you, what they're generally trying to do is piggyback your contacts and trying to get work in wherever you are. So the most common question always was to me was, how did you get that? Aren't you lucky? That's the other one. Aren't you lucky is the other one. Aren't you lucky to be working like this?
It's not luck.
You generally want to kick them politely.
That's interesting, but then I guess with age, older people know how to deal with that question. If you're in your 20s, you might just start blurting out, I got it through this, and then someone's like, okay, and you've taken it off them. But it's the general argument that when you're an older person will have experience and skills level that they should be able to manage these type of
And,
situations.
I mean, one of the things that keeps coming back is flexibility. It gives you time to do other things. So I probably do more work now in areas that are completely unpaid than work in areas that are paid.
Do you find they lead paid engagements? Are they good for?
They can do, or the fact you're doing them is good for the other side of your life, as it were. It's a balance, and as you go through, sometimes I can look at years where clearly I've earned more money than I spent time on the other ones, but the balance changes all the time. And I think that's really an important one. It's always worthwhile putting something in for nothing to get something out. If you're always on the look for something that's paid, so I always encourage people I work with to look at what can they do to demonstrate they're using their skills in another environment. It makes them more employable in
Well, that's interesting. That
Yeah.
you're effectively using the model that bigger businesses do with their corporate social responsibility, doing it on a personal scale. So it's all replicating what the bigger businesses do, which is really
absolutely.
interesting.
Yeah.
And we can talk about that because we recently joined Business in the Community, and we've just moved in. I've looked at a project that they're doing called ARC, where top corporates are putting out their staff into social enterprises in London, and social enterprises are helping people get into jobs and employment. And the research, the impact report showed there were 1,700 jobs in London created. So that exactly follows that model. And if you think about this, that creates people with jobs. They need maybe bank accounts. They need services. That creates more demand in the economy. So I think there's probably an obsession with return of investment. I put in, what do I get out of it? But sometimes it is that long-term game that people need to be mindful of.
I suppose to wrap up, I think it'd be useful for Sarah, you specifically, to just give us, if you could give, anyone that's either looking to sort of get into self-employment at a later age or maybe thinking about doing so at some point in their career, what would be the one piece of advice that you'd give them to sort of that you think would serve them best?
Oh, have lots of energy, lots of enthusiasm, and always turn up on time.
Simple but effective. I think that goes for anybody, I suppose, not just the other 65s. Well, thanks for that, and that's all we've got time for today. So my thanks to our guests, Stephen Pfeiffer, Ed Sayers, and Sarah Hodgson. I hope you can join us again next time on the 19th of November for our National Freelancers Day special. Goodbye for now.